career, I've probably done close to 100 cases to a jury. There are 4 or 5 of them that haunt you, and there are 4 or 5 of them in which you think, despite exhaustively doing things to prevent a result, an innocent person got convicted. Oscar Cervantes is one of those people. David has talked about a number of ways in which innocent people get convicted. The one thing that he talked about that didn't happen in this case was a false confession of some sort. Ernesto Arellano, Richard Olani, and Oscar Cervantes were interviewed pretty exhaustively in this case, and they denied their involvement in it from the beginning and in the end, and everywhere in between. Probably in the history of Yolo County in a capital murder case, there's only been one example of a defendant that took the stand in his own behalf, subjected himself to complete and total cross-examination, and lost, and that was Oscar Cervantes. He took the stand both in his guilt and penalty phase. The jury in the case was out on the guilt phase of the case 30 days, an almost unheard of deliberation. They were split at one point 8-4 for acquittal. We exhaustively, I can't even tell you how exhaustively we investigated this case. We propounded alternate theories. It's been mentioned that Rudy Gonzalez was his information didn't come out. In pretrial motions, we were denied what they call third-party liability. The judge did not feel that the evidence of Rudy Gonzalez's involvement was significant enough to allow it to be presented. But much more substantially than that, it was a time in California history when eyewitness identification was a big issue, but there was a lot of debate as to whether calling a memory expert, an eyewitness identification expert, was something that a court should permit. We filed a motion to do that. We retained one of the most prominent eyewitness identification experts in the country to come in and testify that the eyewitness identification of Oscar was completely false. And the judge denied the motion to put him on the stand. Subsequent to that, the Supreme Court has held that failure to put an eyewitness identification expert on the stand is ineffective assistance of counsel as a matter of law. But we didn't get that opportunity because we filed a motion that was denied. Some of the names that we mentioned here I haven't thought about in years. Christina Martin. Christina Martin was barely 18 years old, and she made a full statement incriminating these defendants. Christina Martin went to trial separately. She went to trial before Oscar and Ernesto Arellano and Richard Olani went to trial. She was offered a plea bargain of accessory after the fact of basically time-served sentence if she would testify at Oscar's trial to what she testified to with the grand jury. And when it came time for her to do that, she couldn't bring herself to do it. It was an extremely brave thing. She went to trial separately, was convicted, and this 18-year-old kid is doing a life sentence without parole for a story she recanted. The eyewitness identification in this case was completely fabricated. The 2 girls that were survivors of these shootings had been shown Oscar's picture at least half a dozen times in the months after that. And we got all that out in cross-examination. But the most outrageous thing that happened in the case, of all the outrageous things that happened in the case, was that Nate Eastland purported to be an eyewitness to the shooting. And then he was arrested, and he was down in Solano County, and they made a deal with him to testify. And Nate Eastland wrote a letter to my co-counsel and I, and said he not only fabricated the entire story, but that his attorney and Jim Walker, who was trying the case with Jeff Reisig, had told him to fabricate, had gone down to Solano County, met with him, and told him that he was going to get a life sentence or worse if he didn't come through, and that he felt really bad about it. And we went down and fully interviewed Nate Eastland. And because Nate Eastland was represented by counsel, we were referred to the California State Bar Association. The district attorney's office of Yolo County searched my investigator's home for notes of the interview. The fact that we had interviewed Nate Eastland in Solano County without his attorney present was allowed to become known to the jury. And we got full cross-examination from Nate Eastland. Oscar Cervantes had virtually no criminal record and absolutely no record of violence. Richard O'Loughy was basically a person that heard the shots and came out of his house and somehow got wrapped into it. I think of the three of them, he's probably the person that had the least contact with any of the real people in the case. So it goes on and on. But I don't know where Oscar's case is. Has he got appeals pending, or is he in Hades, or there's just nothing?
Currently writing the last one he got.
Well, okay. I can tell you, I don't know that we ever more thoroughly investigated the case. Rudy Gonzalez's nephew was an up-and-coming young Norteño gang member in Woodland, and he and his friend, we proved they drove around the murder site 3 times before the shooting. My recollection of the DNA in the glove was that it was tested and there was no DNA in the glove, but that's been a long time. But you know, I just don't know what more I can say. It was a completely and totally. It was at a time when Jeff Reisig decided to run for district attorney of Yolo County. He was in a contested, very emotional race with a woman named Pat Lindsay for his office. I think they needed a really solid conviction, and gang prosecutions have become Jeff Reisig's sort of claim to fame in Yolo County. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with the family more that Oscar Cervantes sits in a prison cell for the rest of his life based upon probably the most fabricated case I've seen in 35 years of rec table. That's how it is.
Thank you, Ron.